I first encountered him through that record as well. The great saxophone player Jaleel Shaw.
Hmm.
He he told me about that record, The Next Step. He was the first one. He's like, this record is like this is the new thing.
Yeah,
And I listened to it, and the melodies and the harmonic world and the way that band played together, it was a revolutionary record.
yeah.
It was a new sound. Like very and it, with a lot of connection to the it wasn't like new for the sake of being new. It felt like there was a lot of connection to what had happened before.
Yeah.
But Kurt's compositional approach, his guitar playing, his tone, the way that that band communicated, it was such a special thing, and I became really obsessed with that album.
Yeah.
Um, to it, listened to it a lot as well. Um, and there's a handful of records that I became really obsessed with over different periods of time. Um, and I was very lucky. Like a few years before that, the record that I was listening to constantly was Terence Blanchard's Wandering Moon.
Sure. Yeah.
And Wandering Moon was an album that I came out and yeah, it was always on for me. I was just always listening. It was those, the days of CDs, right?
Yeah.
Where you got a CD and you listened to that CD over and over again.
Yep.
Um, and so that was like one of my favorite records. And then having the opportunity when I got the chance to play with Terence, that was my dream gig,
Yeah.
right?
How did you land there with Terrence? I mean, obviously he's always recruited, younger guys.
Well,
And
he didn't always recruit younger guys, but he was beginning to enter
beginning,
into
yeah,
that phase.
yeah.
That was he was starting to move into that phase of his career where he was getting a much younger band. Um, and I met him first when I was a student at one of these workshops called the Betty Carter Jazz Ahead
Hmm.
workshop. He was one of the teachers there, and Kendrick Scott and I were both students at the same time, as well as Marcus Strickland and a number of other wonderful folks were there. But I met Terence there, and then I landed the gig through the recommendation of my teacher at Manhattan School of Music, Kenny Barron.
Ah,
So
okay.
Ed Simon, who had been Terence's piano player for like 12 years, um, he was ready to leave the band and just try some things of his own and do some new stuff. And Terence had asked Kenny for a recommendation, and Kenny recommended me.
Hmm.
Um, that was, having the opportunity. I joined Terence's band at 18. I was
Wow, shit.
18 years old.
Man, that's heavy.
Uh, it was heavy, and then I stayed in that band for 5 years.
Yeah.
Um, and basically, so I went from that, and the other dream gig that I had was when I heard The Next Step, which I didn't hear immediately when it came out. I don't think I heard it like a year or two later. And I started to become really, yeah, I loved that record so much and loved Kurt's playing.
Yeah.
And so one of my other dream gigs was playing with Kurt. Um, and so the way that that actually ended up manifesting was through a tour that Eric Harland put together.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
Eric Harland in 2005 put together a tour of Japan for like 2 weeks, and the band was me, Matt Penman,
Hmm.
and Kurt. That was the origin of so many things right there. That tour changed my life. It determined the course of the next decade or more for my career and just everything that I was doing. Um, because that was where I met Kurt for the first time. And that's what led to him calling me to join his band, which I joined in like 2007 or so.
Ready. Yeah.
Um, and it also that also, of course, became the rhythm section for Invisible Cinema
Yeah.
and for James Farm,
James Farm. Yeah, exactly.
because Joshua Redman then heard the record Invisible Cinema and wanted to collaborate.
Ah, okay, that's how happened. The James Farm
So
happened
that's how
too.
that
Okay.
happened. He wanted to collaborate, and he was like, he wanted to make a project with me, and I'm like, hey, how about these other guys from Invisible Cinema? Let's make a band together.
Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. How was it like for you playing with Kurt's compositions? I mean, there's
Oh
some
man.
harmonically some tricky shit in there, like,
Well, that's it. It's very tricky, and so that was one of the things for me that I learned so much playing Kurt's music. I
mm,
learned so much about harmony by just having to play these songs that I didn't understand the chords of, and just trying to analyze and figure out pathways through them. It just it it deepened my sense of what's possible harmonically
yeah.
and melodically. Um, and one of the things that I also really learned from Kurt was the value and the importance and the joy to be found in being a member of a team as a rhythm section.
Hmm.
Because I had sort of grown up until then with sort of the aesthetic of the piano player as like a reactionary, responsive, like,
Yeah.
okay, somebody played an idea, I'm gonna comp some answering phrases, sort of like it was always like jumping in there, jumping into the cracks, and sort of like constantly a conversation. Um, and one day Kurt told me, he's like, man, you sound great, but it feels like you're taking a solo at the same time as me.
Mm. Yeah.
Um, and it doesn't feel supportive. Um, and so he was just like, I I'd like you to think about and like please try to comp for me. Comp for me. Don't interject, but comp.
Yeah.
And of course, me, I'm like, I don't want like, don't tell me what to do. There was that first, that my first reaction,
Sure.
right? Getting a little defensive, but very quickly as I started to try to do that, and then he was like, yeah, that's it. I'm like, oh, that's a different feeling. And it's a different feeling, and it's a feeling that I actually really love. Just that feeling of being part of a rhythm section unit, what it feels like to really join, and what does it feel like
Yeah.
to help? What does it feel like to help the rhythm? What does it feel like to help create and support the harmony, rather than sort of like, what can I do? How can I jump in there? Right?
Yeah. Makes sense.
It
Yeah.
makes it more about us and less about me.
Mm. Yeah. 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 Makes sense.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so that's one of the things left it was super important and left a tremendous impression, and I'm very grateful to him for that lesson.